So thank you all for joining today. What a nice what a nice response we got. We have a nice group of folks, and people are still arriving here too. Um, for those that I've not met, I'm Jeff Schoen O'Keefe. I'm the executive director of Zen Peacemakers, and thank you all for being here today. And I will just say a couple of words, and then I will pass to my friend Ken. Um, this is the first of four sessions of Bernie Glassman Memorial. Today, Bernie on the Street. Next Friday, Bernie the Entrepreneur. Same time, same Zoom link. So mark your calendar. And then Friday the 21st of October, Bernie and Interfaith Zen. Same time, same Zoom link. And then we'll skip a week and we'll go to Friday, November 4th, Bernie at Auschwitz. So we hope as many of you as can schedule will join us. And we'll thank you in advance for doing so. And with that, Ken, let me hand the microphone to you to introduce today's session and the video, the brief video we'll take a look at.
Thank you. A little very short background on Bernie and the street retreats. In a nutshell, Bernie didn't invent street retreats. Like all great artists, he stole it. This time from his friend Jim Morton, who was the dean of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine in New York City. Jim had gone on one of these plunges that was sponsored by the Industrial Areas Foundation, based in Chicago. That was Saul Alinsky's vehicle for training people in grassroots community organizing. And they did a program to train clergy of different faiths to do grassroots community organizing with disenfranchised communities. And part of their training was this, what they called the plunge. We ended up calling a street retreat. And Jim had been on this, I think in his group with Jesse Jackson and clergy from a number of different faith traditions. And he told Bernie about it, and Bernie adapted it. Today's program it's some video of Bernie talking about the street and some videos from two different street retreats. And then there's five of us who will share some of our memories of being on the street. I think that any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Jeff will curate this for us, and in the time that we have, we will answer or speak to as many of those questions as we can. So with that little introduction to the background, here's Bernie in the street.
In Yonkers, across the street from the Zen Community House is an old schoolhouse which has stood empty for over 20 years. When the number of participants during the months of training becomes too high, the school is used as a place for meetings and meditation. For some, the noisy street and public exposure are not easy to take. Today, however, we will all be taking a plunge together, as Bernie calls it. A plunge into the streets of New York with no money and only the clothes on our backs, to live homeless for 1 week in the vastness of this city.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is one of the largest street retreats in terms of starting off. What we are doing is we are going to live in the streets for a few days. It's been my experience that you will learn a lot from the streets, and that it's hard to know beforehand what it is that you're going to learn from. So I always like to say that the biggest teacher is going to be the unknown, that which we have no expectations of, or something will arise which will teach you. So just be open to the streets, open to the people. That's the point of doing this, is to go and be open to what will arise. Meandering is highly recommended. Collecting of redeemable cans and bottles and panhandling is encouraged and required, at least for some time of the retreat. You don't have to be panhandling all the time, but I would like everybody to panhandle some times. Let me go a little over the schedule. We will walk from here to Central Park, and tonight we'll sleep at Central Park. It's supposed to rain after midnight, so we'll deal with that when we get there. Get hot. A number of years ago, I went into the streets to live for a few days and some students came with me, or some people came with me. And it turned out to be very important for all of us. And in reflection, I feel that entering or plunging into parts of life which I'm afraid of or have been avoiding create a wholeness inside of myself. I bear witness to those parts that I've been rejecting or not looking at. And as they come back, I become stronger and more vibrant. They become very important practices for me. And so I've invited other people to do that, and they've been important for them. I look at it as a practice just like Zazen is a practice. And because my experience has been so positive, I keep doing it and inviting people to do it.
Andre! Where are my people?
The people that have gone into the streets with me, and also to the other types of plunges like Auschwitz Retreat, I think have become more sensitive and have been changed into feeling, experiencing, and understanding parts of life which they didn't quite understand before, which they saw, but they really they didn't know how to deal with them. And just like if I didn't see my hands, once I see my hands, I learn how to use them. I'm different. I can do different things. I now can take care. So the people that have gone with me on the streets can't look at street people the same way. Something changes, and I believe almost everyone that's gone with me now has more of a kinship or a feeling towards somebody on the streets. That's me.
A few months later, a street retreat in Cologne, Germany. Whenever Bernie Glassman is on tour, whether giving talks, Zen sessions, or workshops, he tries to make these plunges possible. It doesn't matter where it is in the world. The daily schedule is structured, with the exception of possible surprises. The group splits up. People are on their own, and twice a day they come together again for prayer and meditation at a specified place. No one has brought money. The soup kitchens need to be found. Some go panhandling, a huge challenge for most. In general, it may be said that few people are ready to share this adventure with Roshi Glassman. Solidarity among the homeless is quite strong. Food or a soup kitchen are soon found. To find a place to sleep proves more difficult, especially as a whole group. Weather is an essential factor. In New York it began to rain, and it didn't let up for 20 hours. Subways and train stations were the only places of refuge. Clearly, here in Cologne, the trouble will be the nightly temperature drop. The first autumn frost has already arrived. The group has steadily grown. Several Zen friends from Paris joined, and people from the newspaper and radio come along for a day. A day on the street, begging and looking for food with Zen master Bernie Glassman.
No makusan manda botanan ban. No makusan manda botanan ban. O makusan manda botanan ban. No makusan manda botanan ban. No makusan ban.
That means that right now,
Das bedeutet, dass gerade jetzt
each one of us needs to take the ingredients of their life,
jeder von uns die Zutaten seines Lebens nehmen muss,
make a meal of it,
daraus eine Mahlzeit bereiten,
take a bite of the meal,
ein Stück davon abbeißen
and offer it to others.
und es den anderen anbieten.
So the book is about that.
Darüber geht das Buch.
In my experience of meeting people,
In der Erfahrung der Treffen mit Leuten, die ich hatte,
I've met wonderful, wonderful people that never heard of Zazen,
habe ich ganz, ganz wundervolle Leute getroffen, die nie was von Zazen gehört haben.
who lead the enlightened life that one would have thought, if they were Buddhist and conditioned to thinking that only Buddhists can do that kind of thing, would have thought that you had to do Zazen to do that.
Das ist jetzt verdammt schwer zu lesen. Das heißt, er hat also Leute getroffen, die keinen Zazen gemacht haben, von denen Buddhisten, wenn sie die gesehen hätten und deren Praxis gesehen hätten, geglaubt hätten, dass sie Buddhisten sein müssten, um diese Praxis haben zu können.
I'm sorry.
It was just funny.
Yeah. I'm very interested in a spirituality that goes beyond particular institutions. So I'm interested in people coming to an awakening to the oneness of life and the interdependence of life, but not necessarily any particular form. So my emphasis would be, is there orientation, are there things going on which help people realize this oneness? It could be through Zen, it could be through different religions, it could be in different ways.
Good day, everybody. Peace be unto you. So wonderful to see so many old friends who've changed a little bit since our early days with Bernie on the streets. And to see so many of you who have never done a street retreat before and maybe entertaining the thought. So we hope that these presentations and all will encourage you to do one soon. So Bernie, in his very early days of Zen practice, had made 3 vows to himself. One was that he wanted to found a monastery, which he eventually did in Idlewild in Southern California. And he wanted to be a clown, which he managed to do. And he wanted to live on the streets, wanted to be homeless. And so long before he'd ever done a street retreat, he'd had this desire. And through meeting Jim Morton, as Ken said, it became clear to him how to do it. So it was really wonderful. I didn't expect to see that film clip about that first big street retreat. It was 1997. It was in the midst of a gathering of an international gathering of Bernie's students. A couple of them are here. I see Katrine and maybe some others. I don't see who's on the screen. Pat was there. Paco is there. Many of us others. And it was quite an adventure. But what I remember maybe most clearly was maybe 2 months before. I was helping Bernie, working closely with him. And I'd been there for maybe 2 months in Yonkers. I'd moved from California. And Bernie sat me down across from him in chairs really close together. And he said, you know, I've had this great idea about how to raise money. And he said, like for the street retreat, I want people to raise a mala. And then he told me what a mala was. You know, there'd be one big bead that might be worth $100. And you need to ask many of your friends, at least 5, if not more. And you ask them for specific donations, maybe, until they add up to $500. And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea. And then he said, and I want you to do it. And I was just shocked, right? And I'd heard the expression of steaming up your glasses. Well, mine literally did, you know, they fogged up completely because of the heat coming out of me. And I knew I'd have to raise money to go on the street retreat mandatorily. And although I had enormous resistance in the beginning, because I'd never begged for anything before, in the long run, I found out it was an immense gift to be asked to raise money for a street retreat. Because in doing so, we humble ourselves, we reveal ourselves, we tell people about our spiritual practice, and we learn that it really is possible to raise the money that we need for any good thing. And that if we're truly committed, people will have a hard time saying no to us. So it was an immense, immense gift to learn that. So on that first street retreat, we did start walking from Yonkers, which is, I don't know, 10 miles north of the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, where we sat for a while. And on that walk, it became clear to me, ever clearer, that people weren't perceiving me the way that I was used to thinking they did. I'd had a big growth of beard, really old clothes. I didn't look like a middle-class American, a New Yorker walking on the streets, and I began to feel people wanted to separate themselves from me. And that was a big initial shock. Later, I began to feel actually proud of that. I wanted to be that one. It was different. But in the beginning, it was a little bit shocking. Yeah, we ended up getting soup from a mobile soup kitchen. I think that afternoon progressed to being on the streets that evening, finding a place to stay. And Bernie reveled in all of this because he knew that being on the streets was a massive adventure in life that we never get to take because our lives are so well regulated, so harmonized, so routinized that we never do anything kind of outside of our realm of protection. And being on the streets is a totally different world, a new world, if you will. And for all the people on the streets, it's a deeply bonding experience because we're all experiencing the same thing more or less together. And street retreats are anything but silent retreats because people are talking all the time together, sharing their experiences, sharing their lives. People become lifelong friends through these beautiful, deep retreats. And we're given the opportunity in these retreats to view the world in a totally different way. A, as being semi-homeless people, because the homeless people know we're not homeless, right? We're not even close. But we have time and the opportunity to really see the world in ways we're not used to, because we're usually just beelining for the bus or the train or our office or our appointment. We don't get to stop and look around. And when we do, we see wherever we are with totally new eyes, open, wide, and in amazement at the beauty and harmony of life, even in the streets of someplace like New York City. And to converse with the homeless for all of us in the beginning is a big challenge because we're used to like staying away, as Bernie pointed out in that movie, avoiding them, famously having no change or dollars in our pocket, and so we just walk right by. But in the streets, on these retreats, we meet these people and do see that they are much like ourselves, with human stories and circumstances that led them to that position in life. And conversations can be started, even not being in a street retreat, even in your own life with these people. Instead of just offering them money, you say, how you doing? How you doing out here? Were you eating? Were you sleeping? And they will gratefully open their lives to us. So grateful that somebody has recognized them for being a human being and chancing to talk with them. So I encourage everybody to do so. And it's true, we never see homeless people the same anymore. In fact, it's next to impossible for me not to give to somebody who's asking. And I've even been known to chase them down if they walk away to be able to give them money, to offer them something. You never know who that person really is. The mystical ways people appear in our lives. He also introduced us to the Batman, who I don't think is with us. But he met Batman in a street retreat in New York City under a bridge one day. And Batman had been in Vietnam. Since returning from Vietnam, he'd been homeless. By the time he met Bernie, he'd been homeless for probably 15 years. Batman was a key to the streets for many of us because he lived it. He'd even lived underground beneath Grand Central Station in New York. He took Bernie down there once. But he's a delightful friend of many of us. He's come on many street retreats with us. And yeah, he's been an incredible friend for years and years. I could go on talking, I would love to, but I think I better leave space for somebody else. So thank you everybody for listening. Enkyo, I'll pass it to you.
Well, thank you, Genro. Wow. You know, I was so struck by the video clip because what it brought back, it was exactly what I wanted to talk about too, because that was a really important experience for me. I had always driven to Yonkers or taken the train to Yonkers. And if you think about it, how impersonal is that? You know, you're in a train station or you get in your car and then you drive for like an hour and then you get out of your car and you see Bernie. And instead, we were walking from where Bernie was on Warburton Avenue. We were walking downtown, you know, and it's like 12 miles down to Tompkins Square, where we finally wound up the next day. And I remember the walk. We were kind of like, it wasn't like a coordinated group. It was like a bunch of individuals kind of walking down the street in the neighborhoods. And I remember gathering, Jishu was with us, and she had a heart condition and she felt faint, and we sat at St. John the Divine. And I think Peter took some wonderful photographs of folks there, which we would all remember. And then my memory gets very different as I began to see the vast difference between going out in the world in one's ordinary way, in a car, on a train, with vestments, and instead just kind of walking down the street and entering in to what everyone is experiencing. And as Genro said, to really be present to those who are usually ignored. So I was asked to just give one example of that. And it's very strong in my mind. And most times people ask me to talk about street retreats, I bring this point up. The second day we were down around Tompkins Square, which is not far from New York University, where I was teaching. I was a professor there. So I took my tin cup and I went and I sat on the building next to where I taught. Sat down with my little cup, and colleagues walked by, talking, looking. They never saw me. Who thought it was so important. But I was in a different position. I wasn't walking down the street being an important person. Instead, I was asking, give me something. And that one thing made such a difference forever in my teaching and my understanding of how it is to recognize where you are in each moment and who is also in that space, who is also there. And for me, that was such a teaching. And of course, it was from Bernie. From the point where he had us walking downtown rather than taking a train downtown, to have that intimacy, that presence, and then to simply observe what it is in each of our own lives, how we can see the other, how we can become the other, and how we can dissolve that sense of otherness. So that was his great teaching for me, for which I'll always be so grateful. So and I'll pass the baton to Fleet now.
Thank you, Enkyo. Wonderful to see everyone. Such a large gathering, to see old friends and see new folks that I haven't met anyway. And thank you so much for Genro and Enkyo, everything you shared. I'm gonna say just a little bit about my own experience and about something about my experience with Bernie. I think I'll start with Bernie. What I remember so vividly about Bernie on the streets was how he was completely at home in that world. You know, most of us, especially the first time we go on the streets, and then almost every time we go on it, I've been on many, many street retreats, and it's always, you know, the first day or so, it's really trying to get through this barrier of all of our identities that you have to begin to dissolve for you. And there's just a whole letting go process of, you know, till you're really on the street. Sometimes you're out there a couple of days before you're really there. And Bernie would just immediately drop in. You know, he was just immediately there. He was so comfortable in that world. And the other part was how readily and easily he connected with people. You know, he was one of them. And, you know, that was part of Bernie's magic. You know, he had this chameleon quality to him, right? Because, you know, he wasn't a homeless person. He hadn't lived on the street extensively, but he could just drop right in and, you know, and relate. And they would relate with him as one of them. That was quite magical. You know, Genro mentioned, you know, when we're out there, we're not even close to really being homeless. And that's completely true. I do have one real problem that I'll share, though. I was on a street retreat in Denver, and I was just exhausted and hanging out on a park bench one day. And there were these volunteers from the St. Francis Center, which is an Episcopalian day shelter. It's a pretty rough place that we would go to for lunch sometimes. And they came by and they started trying to talk to me and offer me services. So I thought, okay, I've made it. They think I'm homeless anyway. Yeah, but that was the thing about Bernie. He could just drop right in and connect with people and have fun doing it, right? You know, a sense of play, and that was quite amazing about him. So for myself, you know, Enkyo spoke to that, you know, invisibility, that once you're out there a bit and you're not in your usual garb and you're not in your usual posture and way of being, and you start, it's really, I think, one of the most powerful experiences, certainly for me, and I've heard it from many others, of being on the streets, is, you know, we still have all our identities and we know we're going to go back to the real world and, you know, be back maybe walking in the same part of town at some point in our regular clothes and with our wallet or our purse and our credit cards and our way of functioning in the modern world. And, but after you're out there for a day or two, you have the experience, suddenly people, you think you belong to that club and they're not seeing you that way anymore. you actually experience being invisible, which of course working class people and people of color and women in the workplace have been experiencing forever. But to have that experience for myself, especially as a privileged white male, of that invisibility was really shocking. And then when you get into panhandling, so often, what comes back is just anger and derision or avoidance. And inevitably, when we did street retreats in Denver every year for many years, and most of us came from Boulder. And the deal was you had your bus fare to get on the bus to go to Boulder. And when you got off the bus, it was too far to walk to Denver from Boulder. It would have been a whole retreat in itself. But you get off the bus and then you're broke. You have no money. So to come back 4 days later, you had to panhandle at least your bus fare, which got more every year. It was up over $3 at one point. And one day I didn't get my bus fare till the very end. But inevitably, the people that would be generous and offer their coins or were always working class people, and almost always people of color. When I was in the mood for it, I would very often try to panhandle the guys in suits, and I knew they would never give me money, but I try to use joking and humor sometimes. Wasn't giving them a hard time, but I never succeeded with the suits. It was always the working class people that shared their resources with me. So, I think that's the big, I'll just one aside is completely unrelated, but I'll just relate it to it. Going to Auschwitz every year, when we go to the museum and we see all the photographs of the people who were in prison there. And later then we're over in what's called the sauna in Birkenau, and there's an exhibition of photographs of people from their lives before they were sent to the camps. And they looked like us, regular, middle-class folks with lives and on vacations and at the beach and their nice clothing. And to see that, what gets stripped away, and to see how that social conditions strip that away from so many people because of their socioeconomic status or where they're living or their gender or their race and so forth. So to have that experience, I think is critical to being able to identify with the whole reality of marginalization in our world. And I'm very grateful for that. So thank you. And I'll pass it on to, I guess, Ken, are we coming back to you or who's next here?
Katrine.
Katrine. Okay, Katrine, sorry. Katrine.
Thank you, Fleet, and hello, everyone. I did the street retreat in Cologne in 97. I think that was the first that Bernie was doing in Europe. It was very strong, very important for me, and had a lot of consequences also in our life, Michelle and I. I was very scared before it. I do remember, I thought, oh my God, I had all this sense of insecurity and coming up, and the first night we did not sleep outside. We slept in a big room in a gym, and the morning we went into the streets. And what I remember, I think that's Fleet, you said it, that how Bernie was at home in the street. Immediately I saw that. It's like it was his home. It was so natural in there, meeting people, and he felt so free. I could feel how free he felt, and I felt like this immediately. I felt so free. I mean, we had nothing to do. We had no appointment. We had absolutely, that was so freeing, actually. And there was a time where I had a hard time in my life, difficulties with my teacher, and Bernie was aware of it. And we spent a lot of time talking about it. But we talked like we would have talked somewhere else. We were living in the street. That was life. And I do remember sitting in a cafe with him at a terrace, and people had just left. There was a table with several cups, and he emptied. There was a little cafe left in the cups, and he finished all of them. I was just like, really, it was so natural the way he was doing it. the begging was a hard one. And at one point, I do remember even the place where I begged for the first time. I was near the Cathedral of Gauntt, and I do remember going towards a guy and making a gesture with my hand. And the guy came towards me first, not knowing what was going on and thinking I'm asking for something. And then when he saw my hand, he just ignored me and left and turned away. And I still remember that. And I think it had a lot of consequences for me when I see somebody begging in the street now. I do remember also a lot of laughter and good time, especially at night. We were cold, it was freezing cold, although it was in September, but it was freezing cold, and we were all sleeping against each other like people in a sardine box, a sardine can. There were so many very important moments. Also, we went to a Franciscan monastery because there was a soup kitchen there, and there was a mass going on. We went to the mass first before eating, and I was next to Bernie. And at one point of the communion, I had been raised Catholic, but I had not been to a mass for maybe 30 or 40 years since when I went to this mass. And Bernie pushed me on the, and said, "Why don't you go during the communion?" And I went to, and I saw him going, and I went with him, and it was great. It was great. There was again freedom there. Then we went to this beautiful soup kitchen where we were really received like a guest. There was the tables with the tablecloth, and we were served, and that's really was so inspiring for Michel, who was there to this retreat. And then we, at the end of the retreat, when we came back to Paris, we decided that we would do a soup kitchen, and we will try to serve people and treat people like we had been treated in this place. There was so much care and love, the way we had been treated, and yes, and that's Michel did this soup kitchen, which still is functioning and which is serving a innumerable number of meals every year, and that was really the consequences or the beautiful outcome of our experience there. I could say so much more also, and I'm so happy to see that to have seen the film. I did not remember there was a film about it, and to see the Marzena and Eve and Christian and so many people. And I do remember at the end of the retreat, Bernie said that what we had lived together, what we had experienced together, has created a link which will be there forever. And it's so true. There was so true, this connection that we have in such a plunge. Really. Voilà. So I think the next is Ken.
Hey, so the advantage of speaking last here in this group is so many wonderful experiences that I was reminded of by other people's stories. I went on my first street retreat because I wanted to spend time with Bernie, and he was always too busy. But he said, on the street, I have time. So I was okay with that. And then like Genro, he sprung the Maull on me. In my case, it was 18 beads for $108 each, and one big bead for $1,080. And I was terrified. but I really wanted to get to hang out, so I did it. I was afraid to ask anybody face to face in those days, so I wrote letters, and that in itself was an amazing experience. People who I never thought would give me a bead. My dentist came through. My best man didn't. It was like kind of a sore point for 10 years. You know, I had such a hard time digesting that. But this Maull practice been with me now, I don't know, it's getting to be like close, I don't know, 25 years. I'm still doing Maulls. And the more I've done it, the braver I've got. So this one I never quite finished. I retired before I finished it, but it's 72 beads, and they're $5,400 a bead that I raised money for our charter schools. And sometimes I don't even have to beg. The mala does the begging. I wear the beads all the time. People come up to me, I explain the thing. They say, how do I get a bead? They make the contribution. Out on the street, the time I think I did three street retreats with Bernie and one alone. And one of the times with Bernie, I think it may have been I think it was the first one. He divided us into pods or packs or whatever he called them to do the begging / panhandling practice. And I was in the pod with Michael O'Keefe and Bernie. And they were doing this very, I guess, Buddhist way of begging, sitting on the sidewalk with their hat or something in front of them, not saying anything. I was somehow threw myself into it. I was being a much more aggressive New Yorker, and it was getting close to rush hour, and the streets were getting busy in Lower Manhattan, and I was going up to people asking for money. And I don't know how long we did it, half hour, 45 minutes, I don't know. I came back to Bernie and Michael. I think I had $1.57 that I'd wrangled. They hadn't gotten anything. Bernie said, let's go get coffees. We were right next to, I think, a Dunkin' Donuts, some fast food place. And we go in, Michael and I are tailing behind Bernie. And Bernie goes up to the counter and says to the counter person, we'd like 3 coffees for $1.57. And she says, that'll be $3.75. And he repeats, we would like 3 coffees for $1.57. And she's a little nonplussed by this. She calls the manager over. She says, these guys want 3 coffees for $1.57. And he takes some dollars out of his wallet, hands them to the counter person, and says, give them their coffees. And we took our coffees, thank you, and went outside. One year we went to the Bowery Mission for a meal. And I got time to sit with Bernie the next day. It was really kind of a moving experience there. You know, and the guy who was running the mission was a person in recovery and very impressive guy.
Brother James.
What?
Brother James.
Yeah, yes. And he told a wonderful story about sleeping drunk one night on a subway. Big black guy, you know, and in those days in New York, big black guys got on the subway. People tried to get to another subway car, and this very petite, elderly white woman came up to him, and he's passed out, stretched out on the bench, and she pokes him and says to him, "What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here like this." And she hands him a card to the Bowery mission. And he goes there and he cleans up, and now he's the director of the Bowery mission. And he says he doesn't know whether that really was a woman or an angel, you know. But we're sitting in this community park on Houston Street, community garden. And Bernie has an idea that we should do a Buddhist Bowery project. Which intrigued me. I was always trying to figure out how I could work with Bernie in some way. And I thought, geez, Ken, you're a social worker. You could really help with this. I said, Bernie, maybe I could run this Bowery mission, this Buddhist Bowery mission. And he said, "No, that's very nice offer. I was thinking of Pema Chodron to do it." Pulled the rug right out again. The street was the great teacher. I did get to talk to him, and as he predicted, the street was the great teacher. I think three with Bernie and one alone, I think. And on the one alone, I basically, because I had done 3 already, I sort of knew places to go to survive in New York. And I think 2 years we'd ended up hanging out in Penn Station. One year, Eve and I were sleeping together, you know, next to each other there, you know, when the police came and rousted people, but they left us alone. So when I was on the street alone, I thought, I know a good place to, it started to rain. Well, first I went into a subway tunnel, and then there was a fire in the tunnel, and we got chased out of the tunnel. I ended up in Penn Station, and then, you know, in the Long Island Railroad waiting room. And this time I got rousted, and they asked to see my ticket. And I didn't have a ticket. And I got arrested. Bernie used to say that I was the only person who had ever gotten arrested on a street retreat. I mean, that was a number of years ago, but I still may be the only person who ever got arrested on a street retreat. But although we went with no money, he had insisted that we bring identification with us. I think he was more anticipating hospitalizations than arrests. But there I was in this holding cell in Penn Station overnight with a lot of, maybe a dozen or so other people, none of whom I think were on a retreat. All the rest of them, I think, were actually homeless. But the next morning, I got let off with a desk appearance ticket because I had identification. Aimlessly meandering. It's like a metaphor for life. And I remember sitting on a bench alone, looking out over the East River. You know, and in those days, I used to carry a wallet in my back pocket, and it was always, I would kind of slump down when I was sitting, and my wallet was always coming out of my pocket. And there I was, you know, slumping on this bench, relaxing. This warm sun had been freezing cold the night before. And realizing I didn't have to worry about losing my wallet. I didn't have a wallet. I didn't have anything to lose. I'm sitting there, it's beautiful, you know, and all I could do is I hear Janis Joplin singing, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. And in those days I had a fantasy, kind of my idea for a modern day Walden, that I would do a Thoreau thing and live on the streets for a year. I never found the time, but it was, it's, you know, the impacts are forever. And I'm, you know, so grateful for Bernie inducing me to do this. And if we want to do, anybody on the panel wants to add anything, or Jeff, if you have some questions in the chat.
Ken, I think if we would like to take questions, I would ask. It's nice to hear people's voice too.
Okay, cool.
And for those of you that are familiar with this, and those not, on your screen down at the bottom under reactions, if you click reactions, there's a little thing down there that says raise hand. And there are more of us than I can see on one screen. So if you want to do that, raise your electronic hand, as it were, and I will see, as Zach has just done. And then I'll call on Zach and say, Zach, please unmute yourself. And if we can keep our question lean, there's quite a few people here. And lean question with an answer from someone. Maybe if you have a question, maybe direct it towards someone. Or if it's just a general comment, then no need. Go ahead, Zach, please.
Just a general question for the panel. If there was any concern about security at night, or like getting jumped by anybody, if there was a protocol for that. Thanks.
Genro's got his hand up to answer. Genro, go ahead.
So security is foremost in our minds. And at the beginning of a retreat, we usually do an introduction of maybe 2 hours about the ground rules and the ways we're going to secure each other when we're on the street. And when we're sleeping at night on the street, we're all together in a pod. And there's great security in numbers. I mean, nobody wants to come up against a group of 12 people or more. So there's security that way. We also, in addition to other modalities we teach people, we tell people, we assign buddies for people. So everybody's got a buddy. And nobody can go anywhere without their buddy, including, of course, the bathroom, wherever it is. So we've always got security with us. And the street retreat leaders and the veterans are always watching out over everybody. We're constantly counting to make sure everybody's together. There are many, many strategies many of us can speak to, but there's a lot of security. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Genro.
I would just like to emphasize what Genro is saying. Every street retreat I've been on, I mean, I love it when we sleep together under some protection and it's raining and there are all these sleeping bags up against one another or whatever we have. And I've always felt very safe. It's not that we're so far apart from one another either, maybe a block away. And we have our partner who is watching out. So it's always felt very, very safe to me. And all of the street retreats I've attended have been in Manhattan, in New York City, which can be a little dicey sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you, Enkyo. Paco, I see your hand. Please, if you want to unmute yourself. And looks like you are unmuted. There you go.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's so beautiful to see so many friends here that I haven't seen for such a long time. And as Irina said, you know, the link is amazing. As a person of color, the street retreats meant an incredible thing to me. Having my office in the South Bronx, being on that first one, I remember the battles that I had with Paco, because Paco said, you know, this got to be some white man's idea of some trick. I have to sometimes be escorted to my car with a bodyguard in the South Bronx. 97 was, you know, those were very, very tough years in the city of New York. A lot of crime, much more than I had seen in my lifetime. And of course I said, you know, I'm going to do it, but if I do it, I'm going to bring my knife, or I'm going to bring my gun, or I'm going to bring my this, or I'm going to bring my that. And I had a conversation with Bernie, and he said, you know, you're arguing too much about this. Stop arguing. And I said, shit, yeah, okay, all right. So I went on that street retreat with that sense. And to be short, because I tend to be longer these days as I get older, it was transformative. It was transformative in many ways. It was transformative because of all the things that have been said already. In terms of the people and the welcoming, it was transformative because I met Larry at a different retreat. I'm not sure he was there. Larry Batman Chamberlain. But one thing that I do remember about that street retreat, because it was always done during Easter week. And during Easter week in New York, it rained. And the piece of Bernie that he said in that video, which sometimes some of us hears, but we don't want to admit it, or we don't want to deal with it, or we don't want to digest it, was where he was starting to be able to, and he said it very clearly, that form was becoming less important to him. And he said that more than once. And he gave examples in that talk in Germany of what he meant. And so my Christian upbringing was still very, very, very raw. And so as we were walking somewhere, I said to Pat O'Hara, you know, today is Monday Thursday, which is my favorite day. And Pat, we're here next to the lake. May I wash your feet? And Crazy Roshi, Pat O'Hara, Enkyo said, of course, Paco. And she took her shoes and I washed her feet. And to me, that was like, whoa, you know? Lastly, I'll say that at another retreat, my son was turning 18. And I thought that it was a rite of passage to go on the street. There was a woman who worked with us, Teju, Gina Moore, whose son, Nick, was turning 18. And she allowed her son to go on that retreat with Larry and Bernie and all of us. And my son now is 35. And that street retreat changed his life. He mentions it all the time, all the time. And so yeah, I'm glad. I'm sorry I took more time than perhaps I needed to, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Paco. Monsieur Dubois, you have your hand up, I see. Go ahead and unmute.
Yes, I do. Yeah. Yeah, the street retreat in Germany was really something. And it did change my life. And Catherine mentioned that I created I co-founded a soup kitchen. And I want you to know that this soup kitchen is called L'un et l'autre. The one is the other. And we distributed 130,000 meals a year. So we distribute over 130,000, 140,000 meals a year. And it's a little bit like me. It's disorganized. It's struggling, but it makes delicious food. So please, when you come to Paris, join us.
Merci beaucoup, Michel. Thank you. Thank you. We have a little bit of time here. Please, anyone else? We have a nice group. I'm sure there are other comments or questions or things to share if someone would like. Alexander, let's see. Yes, Alexander, I see your hand. It's the same color as your wall, so I missed it. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, sorry. First of all, I want to thank you all for sharing these stories. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to be here, and also thank Bernie for get the ball rolling. And I apologize for putting the question maybe in the chat too early, but I would be really interested to hear your experience on how eventually your sensorial experience has changed during the street retreat. So did you notice a change in your perception while being on the street? And if so, afterwards, did your emotional reactions surprise you, or your thought processes surprise you? And how did that then affect your view on yourself or other, or on society as a whole? Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. If someone from the panel would like to, Ken, please. Thank you. Thanks. I could see you.
I mean, I'll start it off. I think it changed my relationship to my fears. I think now when I get frightened, that's something I'm more likely to say yes. That's Ken being frightened. I was scared to go on the street the first time. I was scared to go alone. Hadn't planned to do a street retreat alone. It was supposed to be the culmination of my Shuso period. And I was supposed to lead a retreat of social workers and mental health workers and stuff on the street. And Jishu died in the middle of the Shuso period. And I didn't have the energy to organize anything, just barely the energy to get myself out on the street at that moment. And of course, that violated all the safety rules. And I got arrested, but it's a much more scary thing to get arrested by myself, get arrested alone, than it was to get arrested as part of a civil rights demonstration, where everything was planned. You know, the lawyers who were lined up and stuff. It's all scary. Scary stuff happens all the time.
Thank you, Ken. Anyone else from the panel like to respond to Alexander's question? Genro, I see you, and then Genro, and then Enkyo. Thank you.
Just briefly, street people don't get to choose what they have for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. When we go to soup kitchens, you eat what they serve, and gradually you learn to do it most gratefully, because we're hungry and we need food to stay alive. And I found that experience radically changed my attitude towards choices in what I eat. And I'm absolutely, truly, fully grateful for every meal that is presented to me, and take it with deep gratitude and appreciation. Thank you.
Thanks, Genro. Enkyo, please, if you'd like to unmute.
Oh, well, I'm going to follow up on what Genro said. I want you to know that in Manhattan, the Catholic worker has the best soup of all the restaurants in New York. I mean, and so, you know, we like to let go of our grasping and our desire for the best of everything, but my goodness, they give it to you in a big wooden bowl, and it is the most delicious. I mean, and you know, if you're on the street for 5 or 6 days, of course you're eating sometimes at kitchens, like at the Bowery Mission. You know, there's choices from all the different restaurants that give the food to them, and it's very nice. And the Presbyterians have a wonderful thing, but the Catholic worker. So I found myself once again, you know, trying to find for my sensorial. You asked for sensorial, Alexander, and so for that quality that I was trying to let go of, there I was once again grading things and making a difference. And so I have to confess that.
A gift from Dorothy Day, right, Enkyo?
Right.
Thank you, Enkyo. Even Ruth, you have your hand up there patiently for a while.
Even her sister Ruth.
And my sister's here. Just to say one thing, and that is that Bernie had bad knees. So he had sustained knee damage from the time he was like 20 years old, when he used to do judo. And all those years of sitting, of course, only exacerbated it. So those street retreats took a lot out of him, especially in New York when you started with a 10-mile hike. And I know Genro remembers that in '97, he left after a day or two, and he asked us to continue it because he just couldn't deal with the pain. And I got used to the fact that, you know, from 2000 on, he would go on the streets, and I knew that afterwards he would come back and he would just need to lie down for days. His knees hurt him so much from doing the street retreats. But he kept on. I think the one in Springfield that we did was the last one in about 2006, maybe. But he just couldn't. But he was ready to do that because that practice he felt was so crucial. And so he wouldn't let go of it till he just couldn't. But yes, he was ready to pay that price to go on the streets.
Thank you, Eve. Bonnie McWraith, you have your hand up. Your camera's off as well. If you'd like to turn your camera on so we can see you, Bonnie.
Okay, I don't know why my image isn't up, but that's okay.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm a newcomer, totally new, and I take it that you're still doing street retreats from the sound of it. And I'm on the West Coast, Northern California, and I don't know anything about how one would access street retreats. I happen to live in a very small town, but there's a lot of homeless people here. And so I'm wondering if anyone wants to connect with me, because I don't want a big conversation, during this meeting, but I wonder if anyone wants to connect with me and give me some more information about how to do a street retreat or in a small town. So, I mean, I'm just so touched by everything you're saying. I've been immensely touched by Bernie for a long time. And I would like to know more about it. And so that's my request.
Thank you, Bonnie. And Genro will have something to share here in a second. But for you and for everyone, actually, I put my email address in the chat, Bonnie. And please, let's go ahead and connect by email, and I can direct you towards our newsletter where we have notification of street retreats coming up and other events that we do too. But we can take that offline. Genro, I saw you had your hand.
I'm just volunteering Joshin Burns to say a few words because he hasn't spoken yet. He's leading a lot of great street retreats. He's leading one in San Francisco in December, I know. And Fleet and I are leading one in New York next April during Easter weekend. But Joshin, speak up. I'd love to hear from you.
Hey, Genro, thank you. Genro initiated me to street retreats, actually. I do about 5 or 6 a year. In fact, I'm driving down to Washington, D.C. now to do a street retreat this coming week. And yes, we do a Rahatsu street retreat in San Francisco that goes from December 1st to December 8th out there. And we spend a lot of time just walking through the Tenderloin and the streets of the city and finding our way. So yeah, I think we post most of our street retreats on the ZPI website, and folks can see more there. And the next year, we'll also, we've done many cities around the country. This year, we're adding Chicago and Detroit in the next year, in addition to New York, San Francisco, maybe 1 or 2 other places in the next year. So thanks. Good to see everybody.
Thank you, Joshin. There was an electronic hand up earlier, but then it went down. So, Monica. Hi, Monica.
Hi. So I put it down and now I'm here again. So I thank everybody who shared. I'm totally moved. I can hardly speak because I got aware that really street retreats, which I did twice with Michelle. Hello, Michelle. I'm very glad to see you, and Catherine also. They are so immensely special, so out of the space of thinking of most people, that it is really hard to convey it, actually. So I'm trying to write, and I find it still difficult. But one point. We Zenis are praying to save all beings. And often we also find we should feed them, we should nourish them. And there are tales about feeding the beings. And it is so concrete. For me, there is nothing more concrete about sharing the closeness to misery, the closeness to perhaps starving, to all the people in the world who really starve at this moment. So it is about the leaving the metaphors and being concrete on the ground of everything. And this is for me perhaps the greatest practice, although I shy away to say such things. And I would just encourage all people who perhaps think that might be something for them to just do it, because it cannot be really explained. I'm really I must say that I was terribly afraid to do this step. So I'm glad I found this place in Paris. Go wherever you find a trained guide, and you will lose, as Ken said, some frights. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. And we have a chat question from Kristen about the possibility of having a retreat in Germany as well. If there's anyone here, Monica, perhaps you or Franziska or Koho or Michelle or anyone else from Europe who might be able to speak to anything that's on that's coming up, perhaps. Or also, Kristen, you can email.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Koho. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, just if I can serve, we did already in Nuremberg and Bremen. And if Christine wants to make contact, please feel free. I'm available here in Switzerland, in Zurich.
Okay. And Kristen, you can use my email address and I'll connect you with Koho. So we can do that. We have, we can take a couple more minutes if there's another comment or question, as you'd like. We're getting close to the bottom of the hour.
Well, I could just say a word. It strikes me that the street retreat for most of us is the most profound way for us to enter that, dissolve that sense of otherness that we find, throughout our lives and throughout our interactions with reality. And the people who live on the street, the very, very poor, are what we want to push away from our own being. We don't want to be that way. And so that's a, I could almost say, natural reaction. And so what's supernatural is to go on a retreat and be one with that. And it's hard to do. And that's what I think everybody testified. It's not always easy, but it is, for me, it's the best medicine for dissolving that otherness, and not just for street people, but for all the people that we project as other. And that was the brilliance of Bernie, as far as I'm concerned. And I'll always be so grateful to him for that.
Thank you, Enkyo. Ken or anyone else who helped organize this in any other...
I think that's a wonderful note to end on.
Thank you. Thanks, Ken. Before everybody slips away, just from my standpoint, I want to thank everyone for being here and to remind you we have 3 more sessions coming up. So, and each one is topical. So next Friday at the same time, use the same Zoom link, Bernie the Entrepreneur, and we'll have a group of presenters sharing about entrepreneurship in Zen Peacemakers. Friday the 21st, Bernie and Interfaith Zen, and another lovely group of people that everyone here knows. So please join us then. And then we'll skip a week and we'll end up on the Friday of the last day of the Auschwitz retreat, November 4th, for Bernie at Auschwitz. And be sure to watch the newsletter and other notifications about that. So there are 3 more coming up, and we hope everyone can join. So with that, we'll say thank you so much. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Take care of yourselves. Take care of someone else. Bye-bye.